Right, we're now recording, so behave.
Yeah, definitely 18 plus or 21 plus rating on the video.
Might need it even higher than that with us all in. Right, so basically we've got a few new people in as well. Welcome to the Whisky Circus. Anything goes, whiskey, life, whatever we want to talk about. Today we've got a guest in again. Oh, hang on. What? Oh, it's only Brian, he's having trouble. It'll be quieter without him. So basically, we have Michael Henry from Loch Lomond, Master Distiller. I think that's the main title, isn't it, Michael?
Master Blender.
Master Blender. Master Blender. Well, we better get it right. I'll edit that out later.
Start again, everyone. Start again.
Yeah, let's start again. It's amateur hours, don't worry. Anybody got any questions for Michael, or shall I go first?
You go first.
Go for it, mate.
I'll go first. Well, welcome aboard, Michael. Really glad that you can join us. My question will take you about a minute to answer. But could you explain the whole process of Loch Lomond, all the stills, all the things? Just talk about everything.
Okay. Probably the best way to talk about that is distilleries normally control all the variables through the process to give the same quality of spirit. So they control like the level of peat in their malted barley, the shape of stills they have, and how they run the stills. At Loch Lomond, we change the level of peat, we change the shape of stills, and we change the way we run the stills. So we have normal swan neck pot stills that you'll see throughout Scotland, and we'll have our straight neck pot stills. And we run the straight neck pot stills in two different ways. First way is we take a wide spirit cut, and the second way is that we take a narrow spirit cut. So that gives us 3 styles of unpeated spirit. And then when we start to change the peat levels, that brings us up to 8 different styles. So the thing, we then mature them all individually, and then when it comes to any particular expression, we'll have a set combination of spirit types to use in that expression. So we'll combine them. So we'll say, like, for the 12-year-olds, we'll combine maybe up to 3 or 4 different spirit styles for one expression.
Just jumping in there, Michael, could you explain, because obviously, like we say, we'll put this out live onto YouTube or something. Could you explain the difference between the straight stills and the swan necks?
Okay, so the swan necks are your traditional shape of still that you'll see in other distilleries. And then our straight neck pot stills, as they have a straight neck with a series of plates in the neck. So the wash still will have 1 plate, and the spirit still will have, I think, 17 plates in it. These necks are up to probably about 4 meters in height. And what the straight neck with the plates in it just allows a greater separation of flavors. So a lot of people get confused between our straight neck stills and Lomond stills. Lomond stills were created or used by Hiram and Walker in the 1950s. Our stills were designed by Little Mill. And when Loch Lomond was built in 1965, they put the same style of still in. Yeah, so you can see the wash still. It's like a smooth straight column, and then the spirit still, you can see where the plates are welded in.
Yeah.
And that was Little Mill up to the 1950s had practiced triple distillation. And so they wanted to be able to do triple distillation and a double distillation. They came up with this style of still. So they were able to do a double distilled style and a triple distilled style on the same still by changing the cut points they collected at.
So what varying levels of alcohol can you take off your straight stills?
So on a normal, so when we're set for the high collection strength spirit, we'll take the spirit cut from 90% to 80, giving a strength in receiver of 85%. And then we'll run the still like that for about 2 weeks. And then for the third week, we'll drop the strength. So we'll take from 90 down to 55. And that'll give us a strength in receiver of about 65%.
And
Michael, is it Michael? Is it just like a column still on top of a pot, basically?
No, it's not quite like a column still, because the wash still only has one plate in it, and also the top of each still has head cooling, so we can either flood the top of the still as well to give additional cooling. So it's slightly different than a column still.
Brilliant, thanks.
Anybody else question?
I have another one if no one else is going to jump in.
Go on. I've got plenty, but I just didn't want to do one.
You mentioned making kind of different types of spirit, and then you can use them for your different expressions. Do you have a set sort of spirit mix or recipe for all of your sort of different types, you know, like Inchfad and Inchmoan and Inchmurren and things like that?
No. Start with, we're probably going to be dropping Inchfad, Inchmurren and Inchmoan. Inchfad it's not something we've used under the current ownership.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've only ever done single cast bottlings under that name.
Yeah.
Because it gets confusing for people. They don't know. They think there's an Inchfad distillery or an Inchmurren distillery.
Yeah, it's an extra layer of complexity.
Loch Lomond.
Yeah.
So we've started a refresh of our packaging. We're bringing everything under the Loch Lomond name.
Brilliant.
We're going to talk about flavor styles a lot more. So what we'll have for the main expressions in the range, there'll be a combination of 3 to 4 spirit styles. That's the 3 unpeated with 1 peated. And that's Loch Lomond Original, 12 and 18 are all of that kind of similar makeup. The percentages of each style of spirit will change with each expression. So there isn't one set composition for an expression.
You'll just use what tastes good, basically.
Yeah,
It's your job.
It's as the age changes, we kind of change the composition and what we're trying to do. If you take the 3 12-year-olds that we have, the Loch Lomond 12 is very balanced character. So there's some sweetness and a very light touch of peat. So that had a pretty balanced up across the still types, and a very small amount of medium peated spirit in it, again from the straight neck stills. With the Loch Lomond 12-year-old, the fruity expression, we're going to one spirit style, and it's 100% unpeated, straight still, and collected at the high street. So we're really going in on the kind of fruitiest, most estery kind of spirit we have. The opposite end for that is the 12-year-old, the smoke and spice. So that'll be the Old Inchmone 12, and that'll be all distilled from heavily peated malt, so 50 ppm, but distilled 3 different ways. So for the heavily peated malt, distill in the swan necks to give a medicinal character. The straight neck stills collected at low strength give a smokiness, and the straight neck stills collected at high strength gives a spicy peat character. After 12 years, we'll combine them in a way that when it brings down the phenol, the big medicinal character, keeps the smoke there and brings out a lot more spice. So you get a very different peat character than other 50 ppm phenol or other whiskies that start with 50 ppm phenol malted barley. So for the main expressions, we'll try and use combinations that give a very balanced character, and then for certain expressions, we'll go to one extreme of the flavor.
So with your, obviously, if you're changing some of your styles a little bit, will you change the process? Because obviously you do quite a long fermentation there, don't you? So will that change at all?
We're not like, we won't be changing the liquids. We're going to be dropping a couple of expressions, but we're still keeping the actual liquids the same.
So it's just a relabeling.
Yeah. So it's just kind of bringing them all under a Loch Lomond name rather than.
And just to add to that, are you still looking at continuing with the kind of ex-bourbon? I assume is that just to let your kind of spirit character shine through?
What we really want to do is we're focusing on we have a really unique distillation capability, and through all our expressions we want to keep that the way we distill as the focus of all our expressions. So that flavor creation in the distillery will always be at the kind of forefront of our spirit character, and bourbon, particularly refill bourbon, kind of works well to support that. You know, we want the wood to be there, but we want it to be in a supporting role. So we are continuing with the kind of the American oak bourbon, second fill bourbon, recharred American oak kind of wood profile.
Will we see any sherry casks or anything coming out?
Not really for Loch Lomond. We had the Inchmore Madeira. That's been dropped as a core expression. It's being moved into our travel retail. We are going to have a new wood finish coming out for the core range, but it's going to be a French oak, so a limousine oak finish.
Yep.
And with new oak, there's no overlap of flavour. So if we use sherry, it's quite a dominant flavour, and it kind of masks a lot of the flavours we're creating by how we distill. Using a new oak, you know, we're not kind of masking anything that we're creating in the distillation.
So will you carry on experimenting with yeast and that then, or?
I was just about to ask that, Zoran. Nice one.
Yep. So I don't know if you can see that.
Turn it the other way if you can. That's it. Yeah.
Is that the Chardonnay, Michael?
Yeah. We're doing a 12-year-old release of the Chardonnay wine yeast this year.
Oh, brilliant.
Excellent.
So I'm not sure how it's going to be packaged yet. Not sure if release dates, just because of what's going on at the minute. But at some point this year, we will be bringing out a 12-year-old wine yeast fermented spirit release.
Nice.
And will that be part of a core range or just a one-off?
No, it'll be a one-off. We use the wine yeast in
In the
The
original.
original.
yeah.
Yeah.
The original is about 10% wine yeast spirit, so most of the wine yeast production goes into original at 5 years old. We are distilling more, and we've kind of been managing our stock, so we now have a continuous stock of wine yeast from about 2007, 2008.
Yeah.
But as I touched on the kind of the packaging changes, we really want to kind of settle our core range at the minute. For the single malts, and just get the Loch Lomond expressions established before we kind of add more to it.
I remember, Michael, tasting the new make actually that you'd done with the Chardonnay yeast, and it was just incredible how much that had impacted the flavour. Although you could still kind of really taste that Loch Lomond DNA, it was really apparent. How have you kind of found that translate into a 12-year-old whiskey? Is it still noticeable?
Yeah, it doesn't change the overall character very much, but it really lifts the intensity. So, like, even when you put it in your glass, nosing it straight away, you're getting like a more intense character coming on it. On your tongue, it's very much, it's like a lively sensation.
Yeah, quite effervescent. I remember that.
I've written the tasting notes for it on Friday. So like you said, it's like a feeling on your tongue, like an effervescent singiness on it. So it really just dials up the intensity of the fruit character on the spirit.
Michael, the last one of them that you released was Cask 5834. I think that was an
Yep.
Inchmarine wine yeast. Was that one of your early experiments then?
We've probably been doing it for a couple of years before that. So we've tried about 8 different strains of yeast across the 3 unpeated spirit styles. Actually, with the straight necks collected at high strength is probably you don't get all the kind of flavors you're getting from the wine yeast. You actually get a bigger hit from the wine yeast on the straight neck style collected at low strength. So most of our wine yeast spirit is the kind of low strength version. But the 12-year-old that we're releasing this year will be, it's the same batch of spirit as that Cask 5834.
And is that going to be 46?
Yeah, it'll be bottled at 46%. I don't know if we'll get away with natural colour. We kind of focuses a lot on Asian markets and the resistance there to kind of light colored spirit that kind of discriminates against American oak matured.
That's good to know.
There's an expectation anything aged is dark.
So is it still a big issue then, not actually colouring it up for certain markets?
Yeah, we really have to colour for Asian markets, and then by default, the expression has to be coloured.
Okay,
So
you
so
don't. Go ahead, sorry.
no, go on.
So whenever you want to release something that would be available internationally, so both for Asian markets and Europe and so on, it would be the same vetting with coloring for everyone, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I guess it's easier.
So just if it's a global expression, it tends to be coloured up to 18 years. We've done limited releases for our golf partnership. So the last year we did an open course collection, a 19-year-old claret wine finish that was natural colour, and the 2019 open special edition. So it was a no age statement, 46%. We actually bottled that natural colour as well.
Michael,
for ongoing core releases, we would tend to colour.
is the yeast experimentation? Have you tried other yeasts? I presume you have. And is that kind of almost in lieu of cask experimentation?
We haven't tried yeasts as of yet. We probably from about 2001 to 2007, we did a lot of work on yeast. From 2007 to 2014, most of our development work was with the continuous malt still. So the likes of the Loch Lomond single grain. And for the last 5 years, we haven't really had a chance to do much development work, just because of the amount of work we're having to put in to get the malts established. We just haven't had a chance to look at any further development. Personally speaking, I would like to see us start that development work again. We're thinking not brewer's yeast in general, but specific strains of brewer's yeast. If we can look into kind of what flavors specific yeast strains give us, and then try them out in the distillery and see how that works for us.
And on that, how long is your fermentation time?
It's 4 days is our standard, and put in a new set of pot stills 4 years ago. If we'd wanted to drop to 3 days fermentation time, we would have had enough fermentation capacity. But we felt that the 4 days really important to us, so we put in another 3 50,000 litre washbacks so that we have enough capacity to keep it as a 4 day minimum. The longest we do is up to 3 weeks.
Wow.
And that's over our summer shutdown in June.
It's incredible.
Annual maintenance shutdown in the distillery. We'll fill the washbacks before we shut down and leave them for 2 or 3 weeks, and then the first batch of each spirit type then is kind of long fermentation.
And the yeast is still active and alive after 2 or 3
So
weeks?
the yeast will be long dead. So A secondary fermentation with just environmental bacteria.
Okay.
And how are you finding the spirit once it's been left in for 3 weeks then, Michael? Are you finding a lot of different flavours in there, or is it pretty much standard after a certain time?
The best way I can describe it is thick.
Mm.
It's just so full of body. We use the straight necks collected at low strength for distilling the really long fermentations. So it's really just a really kind of thick, full-bodied spirit. We've been doing that for about 6-7 years. So we're not really, it's a few years yet away from being released or anything.
And so
You
we'll
say thick.
release that as an expression on its own then?
It's something where we need to consider internally, is whether like these kind of special batches of spirit, like the long fermentations, the wine yeast, whether we kind of bring them out separately or whether we start to include them in our normal expressions.
I was wondering, as you are one of the few distilleries that distills grain spirit and malt spirit, have you ever made experiences like marrying both spirits at birth and letting
No.
them mature in casks?
No,
Like Northside did that.
We mature everything individually. So all our grain and malt is matured individually. And that's really just to do with stock management. Stock management on a short cycle, you're working at least 3 years. Normal for malts is 12 years. So as soon as you mix them, you're fixing that profile. By keeping them separate until like mature, then you give more flexibility to your stock.
And so
to work your magic.
Go on, Christoph.
I'd say, and afterwards, with separate maturations, more latitude to work your magic as a blender afterwards.
Yeah. And it gives us that
single blend.
That if we're using them at 5 years old, we have full choice. We can use any kind of combination. At 12-year-old, any combination. So it's really about that flexibility to be able to create any of our expressions with that spirit.
I've got two quick questions. You mentioned the single green earlier, which is great. Is that continuing on, or are you going to get rid of that? And secondly, for yourself, what is the sort of spirit style? What do you prefer? Do you prefer the sort of standard still or the straight neck, high or low?
So on the first question, the peated grain or the single grain, we are keeping it. To feel that adds to our story. Like when we talk about using distillation to create flavors, like that single grain from malted barley really adds to that. We're going to be bringing out a second single grain. So it'll be no age statement again. I don't know if you can see that.
Peated one.
Yeah.
I've just opened the Tweeddale one. That's one of yours, I think, Michael.
Yeah. The Tweed
Grain of truth
is ours, but that's a combination of wheat and malt. So again, later this year, we're going to be bringing out a peated single grain made from 100% peated malt.
So this is off the column stills in the single malt side rather than the grain side then? Yeah.
So they're the continuous malt stills they're all copper construction, and they're much smaller than the continuous wheat grain stills. When I say these are all copper, that's the cladding or insulating cladding around the still, so you can't actually see like the copper underneath. But again, normal continuous stills are kind of steel with like a sacrificial copper section on them. But these malt continuous stills are 100% copper.
Okay.
The second question, I don't know, do I have a favorite spirit style or a favorite?
Yeah, from the ones that you've mentioned, used to, what is your favorite style?
The favorite spirit style is the unpeated straight neck still collected at low strength. So it's the one we use for most of our wine yeast production now. And the wine yeast fermentations with the straight neck stills, wide collection strength. That's my kind of favorite spirit style of ours.
Cool.
And so with the way you're making, are you experimenting at all with different strains of barley, or are you sticking to concerto? Or
I know we haven't changed the strain of barley we're using. I think for single malts, we're just going to stick to the standard malting variety that we're using at the time. I think for us, probably more relevant to look at yeast. We may look at type of malt, so whether we on single malt, but probably again what I want to look at first is different grains for single grain. Probably some other Scotch distillers are using rye. I would like to see us using unpeated or unmalted barley, maybe oats, and look at that on the single grain side first.
And are you expecting any sort of shortage this year? Because obviously the farming side of it, we're struggling to get a lot in the ground, and we have struggled to get a lot in the ground. So have you sort of got a contingency plan for that, or is this not something that you're expecting to affect you?
I'm not involved with the malt buying directly, so I don't know too much about that at the moment. I thought that this year's okay. Next year, that if we're not, it's looking like we'll probably be down about 3 months production.
Yeah.
So that'll hit 3 months worth of malt buying, or 3 months worth of malting, and then 3 months of what the farmers are getting.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a knock on as to next year, what financial situation the farmers are in, and how much they're willing to kind of commit to malting barley growing.
Yeah. So, I mean, with that then, I mean, obviously I know you take a lot of interest as to the terroir and things like that of things. But, you know, how important do you feel knowing the origin of where it comes from, or are you purely just down to how the end product tastes?
For me, it's about how the end product tastes. That's what everyone gets in the bottle, and every step of the production process contributes to that to some extent. But it's really down to the distiller to say like what part of their process puts most impact, flavor. If you're building a brand on single farm, single strain kind of barley, then you need to control everything that happens after that very closely.
Yeah.
And I think that's, again, that would be difficult to do. I think we're using one strain of malt barley for malting, and the variation we get through the year just with ambient temperature differences, that really affects your fermentation. It's like in winter and summer, and also your distillation, the amount of reflux you're getting in the still. Like if you're distilling in winter with a 5-degree ambient temperature compared to summer where the temperature in the still house can be up at like maybe 35 degrees, well, that really hits your spirit. And if you're distilling different farms through the year, again, those ambient temperature differences would be very hard to control.
Yeah.
And then you look at warehousing. When we're putting together malt fattings, we always pick from different warehouses. With metal warehouses, the pallets at the top get a really different maturation profile from pallets in the bottom, and pallets in the center used to have a different maturation profile than pallets from the perimeter, just because of temperature differences over 5-10 years. So again, if you're going to that kind of single farm, single barley extreme, you need to then control your maturation conditions. You need to like factor in spread throughout a warehouse and that those temperature differences during maturation.
Yeah.
With all that leads to variation in spirit flavor.
I mean, I know one thing we spoke about when we was up at the distillery with you, and you kind of touched on it earlier with one of the questions as well, that obviously you use a lot of bourbon cask, which to me emphasizes the distillery profile more than using a dominant sherry wine cask. Is this the reason you do use bourbon cask then, to try and highlight your distillery profile rather than hiding it with a dominant cask?
Yeah. No, we use American oak a lot, and that's really say it by using. So this thing we use first fill bourbon a lot more for younger whiskies. So say for likes of Loch Lomond Original, we'll probably have about 50% first fill bourbon on that. But when we get to like 12-year-old, we're probably talking 10% first fill bourbon, 10% first fill rechar. So as the age goes up, the amount of first fill wood we use goes down. So we're always balancing like the wood influence with the age. And that's even with American oak. So we always try to not minimize the wood impact, but just let the wood do its job as a supporting act to the distillery character. The process is, you probably have more variation in process distillery to distillery that gives you differences in spirit character flavor, whereas like the bourbons that we use will be the same as nearly every other distillery. So the more time in wood, it kind of brings all the flavors together. So if you're using a strong wood influence over 15, 20 years, then it reduces your distillery character and the spirit differences between our distillery and another distillery.
Yeah. Anybody else got any questions? You're all very quiet.
In terms of the experimentation you've done, be with yeast or with the different stills, is there anything that just hasn't worked in the end?
The yeast, we had a lot of issues getting that to actually ferment, because wine yeast is used to the sugars you get from grapes. rather than the sugars you get from barley. So a lot of that spirit had to kind of be redistilled because it just the fermentations didn't work, and we had to try and reclaim the spirit some way. When we got the fermentations right, we then had to look at how we capture the flavors that the wine yeast were producing, and we tried like across the three types of unpeated spirit. And with the Swan Neck stills, you're not really getting any difference between the wine yeast fermentations and our standard fermentation. And that's really just the stills don't kind of capture or don't select out the flavors that the wine yeast are creating. So we have had kind of spirit that was wine yeast fermented but then didn't taste any different. So we have had a lot of trials that haven't kind of worked out along the way. And that probably the wine yeast maybe took about 7-8 years to get right, doing maybe 2 batches a year.
And
Well,
so, go on.
No, that's on you go, Aaron.
I've not got a question. It's more of a bit of feedback, I guess. I mean, from my point of view, Michael, I'm kind of glad that you guys are sort of like bringing everything under one banner to Loch Lomond rather than how it is in its current form. Because I'll be honest, even for someone like me who's been drinking whiskey for a long time, longish time, it seemed, you know, the range was a little bit daunting in a way. You know, it was sort of like the differential between it. I appreciated the word that, you know, there are differences and the varying processes and the actual background to the distillation and things, which is great. 'Cause it's nice to have such a varied distillery on one site. I mean, let's face it, it's incredibly unique. But I think it will probably help a lot more whiskey drinkers sort of like get the foot in the door with Loch Lomond, I think, because, you know, you make some great spirit, and I think bringing that all under one banner, like I said before, is a really good way to go, to be honest with you, particularly when you've got a market that's got such a wide variety of well-known brands already as well. I think it's probably the best step, to be fair. So kudos to you for sort of like taking the step and doing it.
Thanks for that. Again, that's something we've really struggled with over the last 5 years, is how do we tell our story? People are used to hearing about different age expressions, different cask types, but when you start talking to people about still shapes and yeast types, you need a certain level of kind of understanding for that.
Yeah.
So what we're
Salve,
it being daunting for people to kind of understand Lomond, so we're trying to work on that even with the new packaging, and we'll talk a little bit about distillation, but we'll lead with flavour. So like the Loch Lomond will be a balanced expression. There'll be a fruity and sweet expression, and there'll be a smoke and spice expression. And for each of our kind of core range expressions now, we'll have that kind of 2 words flavour descriptor on them, so that you don't need to understand the distillation or how we get to that.
Yeah.
There will be something that's kind of quite easy to understand, and hopefully kind of encourage people to try our whiskies.
Cool.
Are you still
It
going to
kind of
have that
seems like,
information on the
Michael.
packaging, though? Sorry.
Go on, Brian.
Sorry, Ed. I was just saying, are you still going to have the information on the packaging, Michael, to explain the still types and the strengths that you get this whiskey from?
I don't think there'll be too much on that.
Or at least put it on the website.
Yeah, I think I have seen the new packaging, but it's kind of gone into my head and out again. I haven't had it's been a few months now since I've written a lot of the text for the labels. I'm trying to remember if we put the kind of still icons on to show like what still shapes were used in that expression. But I'm sorry, I just had not kind of 100% on it at the minute.
Look forward to seeing them anyway.
It seems, Michael, that you're kind of making a real concerted effort to kind of consolidate everything, not only with the kind of product range, but also you've got such a great scope for experimentation, and there are so many different things you could do, and you're kind of trying to just kind of standardize things, or at least work out what are the things you want to change, like changing yeast rather than changing cask, for example. Are you thinking with this new range that it will kind of be, I guess, at its most simplest, kind of separated by age statements?
No, because this year we're going to have 4 12-year-olds out, including the wine yeast expression. So we're going to, the 3 12-year-olds will be at the heart of the new range. So there will be, be the Loch Lomond Original, the entry level, the 3 12s, a new 14-year-old limousine oak finish, and then the 18-year-old. So there will be a range of age expressions. But what said, they'll probably be more differentiated by the flavour descriptors on them.
So basically, the way you want to go forward is, rather than concentrating on just an age statement and the different types, is an actual flavour profile description rather than anything else then?
Yeah.
Is that just across those 12-year-olds?
No, that's across all the expressions. So the one I'm not, starting with the Loch Lomond Original, we're using the kind of the descriptor as smooth to perfection, and that's really just for who it's aimed at. That's an entry level kind of wide target market. So a lot of people getting into whiskey, although smooth can against some people once they're kind of a lot more experienced, but when you're getting into whiskey, smooth is a descriptor that a lot of people look for. And as we go up, we'll start to get more specific. So the 12-year-old, the current Loch Lomond 12-year-old will go to the perfectly balanced. Yep. The Inchmurn will go to Loch Lomond 12-year-old fruity and sweet, and the Inchmone 12 will go to the smoke and spice. I'll see if I can call up the other names of.
How many different names are actually out there from Loch Lomond? So obviously you've got Loch Lomond, Inchmore, Inchmurren, Croftiga, and it just goes on. How many actually is there?
There are, for the unpeated, there's Glen Douglas and Inchfad. For the peated styles, there's Inchmone, Croftingea, Craig Lodge, and then Inchfad medium and Inchfad heavy. So that's the 8 kind of spirit style names. We still use them internally, but even with that, I spend half my time trying to tell like our marketing and sales like what they are. So
was Rosedew a long time ago closed before for unification of the names, or was it for another reason? I have half evaporated to the Angels Mini from Cannon Heads of a Rose Do 9. Do you know why was it closed something like 20 years ago?
Ros Do was a name that we used for one of our pot still, our single malt styles, and we stopped distilling that in 2002. We've used the name internally for our malt-based single grain, but I believe there's a trademark issue. Ros Do is named after Ros Do House, which is part of Loch Lomond Golf Club now. So I believe they have the name Ros Do.
Okay.
So we've stopped using that. There's also, I've tasted old style Ros Do. I wasn't a fan of it, and I'm happy to see the back of that name.
So with the distillery, obviously, that we've sort of touched on earlier, the way you've got quite a lot of different styles. I believe we haven't really sort of touched too much on the grain side. I think you're about, is it 18 million litres a year on the grain?
Yeah. So running at full capacity, we're about 18 to 20 million on the wheat-based grain. So that's your kind of what you'd say is your normal blending grain.
Yeah. Is there any plans on sort of releasing any of those as sort of older expressions or things like that?
No.
No. Just all for blending.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's the single grain as a category isn't big volumes. So we'd rather focus on our malt-based single grain, and see like high edge single grain, like blending grain is quite conventional. And it's more, those edges, you're more talking about the flavor impact of the wood on that spirit.
Yeah.
I'd rather keep single grain about how it's distilled and use the malt based single grain, because we bottle that at kind of 4 or 5 years old, and like the flavor you get from the malt based single grain is so much richer than what you get from the wheat based. We see that as much more a way to go for us.
And have you any age stocks of that then?
Probably it's very up and down, because when we started to distill that, we used most of it for blending. So it's really only from about 2013 on that we're getting kind of significant stocks of it.
Yeah.
But our stocks for that, like because single grain is like small volumes, we're kind of well covered for stock.
Because I think, are you running about 3.5 million litres off the malt continuous stills?
No, we're running about, that's our pot stills are running about 3.5 million.
Right.
The continuous malt still we can do up to 2 million, but we haven't kind of hit that since about 2015.
Right.
Kind of cut back a lot on that because we're not the blend market where most of that spirit was used in is really softened. So we're probably distilling maybe a quarter of that a year now.
Right.
Do we have any chance to see with your low stock on very old grains to see like a 30-year-old single grain out, or is it just a dream for at least a long time again?
No, I don't see us doing that kind of age statement single grain. I think we'd rather focus at the kind of younger age for grain. See it as more of for people who have let's say, like the people in today, it's more adventurous whiskey drinkers that are looking for something different. by keeping the age young, the spirit character high, it's a lot more exciting, a lot more kind of challenging and interesting.
What's the grain market like in Asia, Michael?
I don't know how much we sell there. I don't think it's big volumes. I think it's still Europe's our biggest market for single grain.
Yeah.
I think it's France, the Netherlands, Belgium, I think are the kind of main markets for it.
Michael, you're talking about the sort of young and flavoursome drams. So this Tweedale stuff that I'm drinking now, it's the first ever peated single grain.
Yep.
So why did you give it away? Why didn't you bottle it yourself?
Because we've so much going on, we really don't have the resource to bottle everything that we're distilling ourselves. And also what we're saying about our kind of brand refresh this year, when we sold that to Tweedale about 2 years ago, we're still, it didn't really fit with us. So we're still trying to establish what Loch Lomond is, and it's taken a while to find a home for the single grain, for the peated single grain, and to find a purpose for that. I think this year, with the kind of change to kind of bringing everything under Loch Lomond and using the kind of flavour descriptors on it, the peated single grain is starting to fit into that a lot more. And it's helping to add and to explain kind of what our story is.
What percentage of peated grain and peated malt do you actually make compared to your norm, for your production lines?
Probably our peat production is about three months a year. So it usually runs from about the end of February to the end of May.
Yeah.
Down.
Is that reasonably long for a distillery?
Yeah, it's increased over the last 5 years. It used to be we'd do maybe 2 weeks in heavy peated and 2 weeks in medium peated. It's probably 3 times as long as it was 5 years ago. That's really demand for peat for 3-year-old blended malt.
Mm.
So we supply. We're still. Our business is based on single malts. That's a relatively small part of our business. It's only been the last 5 years we've been doing that. Our UK business, which is High Commissioner, that Simon showed the bottle of, that's still our biggest whiskey by far. And then we have a commercial part of the business where we supply blended malt blend to third parties, and most of our peated production actually goes to 2-year-old blended malt, or likes of particularly Asia.
Okay. Anybody got any questions? Everybody's been quiet today.
I have another one.
I've got one in a minute.
If no one else has.
I was going to say, is the peated grain going to be 50 ppm as well? Or
Yeah. So it's distilled from 50 ppm phenol malted barley, but the actual, when distillers talk about ppm phenol, it's usually in the malted barley. It's not in the actual spirit itself.
Yeah.
How you distill peat really determines a lot of the character you get from it. Because total phenol, that 50 ppm figure, phenols, it's not one single flavor compound. What is being measured in that 50 ppm figure is 7 different phenols, and each of those 7 phenols has their own individual character. So likes of, I think guaiacol have a smoky character, MP Creasol have a phenolic character, like medicinal character, and then there's like phenol esters that give you like clove vanilla type flavors. So by distilling the 50 ppm malt different ways, you change the balance of the individual phenols you're getting, as well as the total amount you get in new mix spirit. So peated single grain, it will be distilled from 50 ppm phenol, but you're probably looking at about 5 to 8 ppm phenol in the new mix spirit, and that'll be heavily slanted towards the kind of sweet, spicy type phenols rather than the kind of medicinal phenolic flavors.
So where is your peat coming from?
It's northeast Scotland.
So Aberdeenshire.
Yeah. I forget the name of the peat bog, but it's commercially malted from northeast Scotland.
Are there other places in Scotland, Michael, where peat is certainly mainland Scotland, where peat is sourced from? I know Aberdeenshire's obviously used very heavily, but are there other locations?
The thing is, mostly northeast. I think there's Aberdeenshire and there's Brian Tom and Tool, kind of the main blankets that are harvested for use in whiskey. Then you're getting into Islay whiskies after that.
I mean, listening to some of what you're saying, then the thing I'm picking up the most is that a lot of what we're getting in the bottle is really down to the distillation process. Obviously, the cask will affect it, but I think sort of, again, when we was talking while we was up there, that we was in agreement that, you know, the biggest part that plays in making whiskey is the distillation process.
Yeah.
Yeah, very distillate focused.
Yeah. I think, like, if you're talking about peat, if anybody here has tasted Inchmone, the current Inchmone 12-year-old expression, like that is all distilled from 50 ppm malted barley. So that's the same as Loch Lomond Frog.
Yeah.
But if you taste like our expression compared to those, it's like night and day.
Yeah.
Distillation selects out a lot of the flavors that you have from the malt and the material you start with. So it has a lot more impact in terms of what you're letting through. So by changing your distillation, you're kind of change what flavors you take out of the starting material.
Yeah.
So you're looking to sort of increase those certain flavors you get from the mainland peat.
Well, that we look to do it 3 different ways. So we distill for single malt, we distill the mainland peat 3 ways, and we focus on that kind of medicinal. So the first style will give you the medicinal kind of heavy phenolic peat character, and that's from the Swan Neck stills. The second is the smoky character, and that's from the Straight Neck stills with the wide collection strength. And then with the Straight Necks at high collection strength, that really only selects the kind of lighter, softer phenols, so the kind of spice-driven peat character. And then that allows us, when it comes to 12-year-old, again, by changing how much of each of those 3 styles you put together, you can then play a lot more tunes with peat character. When it came to the release of the Inchmone 12, We could have used a single spirit style and made it a big peat hit, but we deliberately used the combination to give that kind of balanced peat character to show the impact of distillation on peat and to show that to make it different to an Isla peat, where it is just that kind of big phenolic peat character.
And do you know whether the kind of different flavors that you get from the peat is that more down to the strength that you're distilling it to, or is it copper contact?
It's down to, I think, reflux in the still. So and the cut points. So it's really the Swan Neck still is the easiest for those big flavors to get kind of up in the still into the new make. So you've the least reflux on the Swan Neck stills, whereas the straight necks at high collection strength, you have the most reflux there. So it's really only the kind of lightest peat character kind of gets through that still.
I mean, sort of talking on different, slightly changing the subject a little bit, but talking about different strengths and that. Have you played around with the different strengths, what you put the liquid into cask then, or
No,
is it just
we've kept that pretty standard at 63.5.
Yeah.
We did up until about 1990s. We did fill at 75, but that was more for using less wood.
Yeah.
So we've kind of stopped that and gone to 63.5 as our standard. We still do some batches at 75, but it's maybe 1 or 2 fillings a year.
Yeah.
It's really for that then's allocated to high edge use. So that'll be for 20, 30 year plus expressions.
I was going to say, because I mean, my understanding of it all is that if you cask it at a higher strength ABV, then in theory you're looking for a longer maturation. Does that sort of come down the other way? So if you put it into cask at a lower strength, could you in theory mature it slightly faster then, or does it not work like that?
And it works like that because it is about the surface area of the wood to the kind of amount of alcohol in. And as you increase the amount of alcohol and the strength you fill at, you decrease the kind of surface area ratio. So it occurs a lot more slowly. So you could mature faster by going at a lower strength, but then you also extract different flavors from the lower strengths. You then start to change your flavor profile. And it's also then, it costs more in terms of wood and storage.
Yeah.
See, talking about that particular point, the strengths, something that's interested me recently, when I haven't come across a lot about it, but I was interested in the process of reducing from cask strength to more of a bottling strength, for a finished product, because I presumed quite naively that this was done quite quickly. But from what I've read and heard, that's not the case. It's more of a gradual kind of thing, because you can actually ruin the whiskey.
I don't know. That's probably up for debate between.
Yeah, so I don't know much about this at all.
So I know some people will reduce at 3% at a time, and then so they'll reduce by 3%, leave it for a couple of days, add more water, so it can take up for maybe 2 weeks to get down to bottling strength.
All right.
But,
yeah.
The throughput at most bottling halls, I don't see how they can do that.
I don't know much about it. It's just something that's popped up recently on a couple of questions, and I thought, well, I've never actually talked about that before. And I mean, can it shock it? I mean, I actually read that it can quite damage the whiskey, but again, I don't know personally.
So I don't think so.
Right. Okay.
I think that depends whether you're using that water from North London or not.
Yeah, they should only do it with red and white water, not blue and white water.
Exactly. I mean, that is a very interesting point in the fact of, you know, it could take as long as 2 to 3 weeks in theory to get it down to bottling strength rather than, you know,
Well, that's what
just maybe a few
surprised me.
hours or
Yeah.
a day or two.
Yeah, that's what surprised me. I hadn't really considered it, and I thought, well, how long does it take? Because I presumed it was quite instant, to be honest.
Yeah. If you look at any bottling hall doing a number of expressions, they won't be using one vat for 2 weeks for one bottling run.
Yeah.
They would need, their vat capacity would have to be huge to be able to do that.
Yeah.
And Michael, can I ask you a question about your wood policy? I know that you have cooperage on site. I know you've got Andy Moore, who is incredibly experienced, and you know, I've seen firsthand that, you know, you guys do shave off char and sort of retoast and rejuvenate your casks. How much kind of management do you actually sort of do in terms of rejuvenating casks versus sort of purchasing from distilleries in America?
No, we always purchase new wood every year. That's more to manage, we'll get the kind of flavour impact from the first fill, but also to manage our wood population. Really, we have a cask population of about 420,000 barrels at the moment. So we look to kind of replace a certain percentage of that a year.
Mm-hmm.
We keep our kind of barrel lifespan at about 40 years. So if you think that we'll buy new bourbon casks, we'll buy direct from Heaven Hill, Jim Beam mostly. So we'll buy between 5 to 10,000. At the moment, we're probably about 10,000 a year. So it's probably just under £1 million on new bourbon a year. We'll look to fill those 3 times and then rechar for another 3 fillings, a second rechar for then a further 3 fillings, and then scrap.
Yep.
So we'll look to get 9 fillings out of a cask. But it does vary with our current makeup. Our kind of average fills about 5 years. So if you take 9 fills at 5 years, we're looking about 45 years for a cask.
Brilliant.
So with the way things are going, do you see many changes in the way you go forward with the distillery? Obviously, once we get out of lockdown, do you see any big changes, or do you think you'll just go back to roughly how you was working before?
Production-wise, I think we'll go back to how we worked before. Maybe like marketing, sales, finance, like they're nearly all working from home at the minute. So that will be, we won't completely do away with kind of central office, but there'll be a lot more people maybe working from home 2 or 3 days a week.
Yeah. Do you see,
for us, for like the operations, for anyone involved in operations, you know, there's only so much you can do at home and the distillery.
I mean, do you see, obviously things like this are popping up all over the place and virtual tastings. Do you see that actually carrying on then, or do you think it will just go back to in person all the time?
I think it'll be another way of sort of engaging with people. I think still that face-to-face at whiskey festivals and tastings is, I think it's hard to replace that.
Yeah.
The engagement you get with people, it's a lot easier to talk to them when they're in the room with you. Also, whiskey festivals, you're not just going to see the distilleries. You're going there to see your friends and people you've maybe met at another festival before. So it's a very social. There's social events, not just whiskey events. And we have 20 odd people in here today at a whiskey festival. You're going to be meeting like so many more people. So I think that kind of the social side of it will mean that whiskey festivals and tastings, whiskey clubs, I think will be still be the main kind of focus.
I mean, and sort of on that then, will we, assuming things get back to normal by the time the festivals come round, will we see you at any festivals this year, or?
I would normally do the Whisky Exchange show at the end of September. But I don't really have a team of people that kind of works with me on like blends and cask selection. It's still, I'm still kind of tied to the distillery in terms of production.
I'm sure we could sort that out if you want, Michael. There's a few of us here that would volunteer. And seeing as I mentioned it, I'll come first.
Seconded.
That's the main reason I'm not. I don't know much. I'm kind of tied to the distillery work-wise.
Yeah.
We have brought in another blender. So we've employed another blender with the company. So Ashley joined us in October. She came from the blending team at Chivas.
Right.
She started working on our single exclusive cask program for our distributors. I know a few people have seen the Loch Lomond Tawny port with the whiskey shop last week.
It's lovely stuff.
We run a program for our distributors every year that we offer them a selection of single casks and they choose ones for their individual markets. And then she'll also be helping with the commercial work, so the kind of bulk whiskey sales to third parties, so that I can have more time for the single malts and sort of tasting and events.
I mean, I know it's a sort of how long is a piece of string question, but in theory, how long does it train somebody up to be, to take over from you if you're looking to retire? Because obviously, look at David Stewart over at Balvenie and that, and it seems to be he goes through people training up and then they move on before he gets to retire. So, how long, in theory, would it take for someone to learn your job?
For me,
is that forever?
I'd say at least 5 years.
Yep. I suppose, does it all depend on the individual's nose and things like that? Obviously not the size of it, but how well they pick up.
It's really on their ability to learn.
Yeah.
The nose, I've not got an exceptional nose. It's a nose like up to maybe 200 casks a week.
Yeah.
I'm just constantly using it, so it's more practice. You build up the kind of nosing side, but it's really it's almost the philosophy side of it as to how the distillery operates and how you get your kind of distillery character together and your understanding of the spirit and how it behaves. It's that you only get through constantly nosing it and working with it. That you can really then take on like the single malt work.
So has anybody got any questions now?
Michael, you mentioned sorry guys. Michael, you mentioned the collaboration with the Open Golf Championship. How did that come about, and how do the expressions vary from the other Loch Lomond expressions?
It's partly to do with the business side and partly that our CEO is a huge golf fan.
Me too.
But in terms of markets where golf is high visibility, it overlaps really well with kind of our target markets. So likes of Asia, States, Europe. Golf is like a huge participation sport. It's watched a lot on TV. So we kind of were in discussions with the RNA. We sponsored the British Ladies Open before, and then when the opportunity came up, we took on the kind of the British Open as a 5-year partnership with the RNA. So it was really to give us exposure across the kind of golf markets like the US, Asia. As part of that, we do 2 expressions every year. And we try and, so we'll do like a non-edge expression for retail price about £35. And then we'll do a higher kind of price version set about the £150 mark. The kind of the non-edge expression, it's really the first year we did it, we used a lot of wine yeast in it, and that was like an introduction to Loch Lomond. We kind of made it as fruity as we could. Last year we did a Distiller's Cut edition, and that was really just for spirit from our straight neck stills. And that was the link between triple distilled style for Ireland, that being played at Portrush. For the open course, we kind of tie it into that venue. So for 2018 with Carnoustie, we did it as a 1999 vintage, and that was the year that Paul Laurie won at Carnoustie. Last year, with it being played at Portrush, we used the claret finish, and that was due to Portrush being home to 2 winners of the claret jug, which I think is still for any course. Next year, with it being supposed to be in England this year, but now that's kind of pushed back to next year. We had done an English oak finish for it being played at Royal St George. So that'll now go out next year.
So how far in advance do you start thinking about these bottlings that you're going to do for it?
The first year that we did it, we agreed the partnership in February, and we had bottles released in April. So it was kind of just under a 3-month turnaround for it. But since then, we've kind of had time to plan it more. So we have the kind of next 3 opens planned.
And is that planning on sort of based on what you think is suitable, or do they have input as well?
No, it's really down to about the liquid we use. We run it past the RNA, but it's usually just to get an okay from them.
Yeah, I guess that's how it should be.
But we have to run all labeling past them to make sure we're like using the logo properly. There's a lot of kind of commercial side to it.
Yeah.
So
go on.
I was going to say, Ed asked about your wood policy earlier. I've got a bit of a poor connection, so you may have mentioned this. With the recent relaxation from the SWA on wood policy, are you taking advantage to get any of those Calvados casks or the like Calvados tequila and experimenting with those?
No, we're doing some trials with wood, but again, it's been mostly new oak. We've bought in tequila barrels before just for general use, and I say we bought them once, so we won't be doing it again. Casks coming from Mexico. by the time they're put in a metal box and shipped from the distillery to wherever the fruit's coming from in Mexico, they're baked. The condition they come out of those containers once they get to Scotland, the wood quality is really poor on them. So, like, genuine tequila barrels from Mexico, we're not looking at. Calvados, I don't think we'd look at. We were doing some work with Armagnac casks. That's really just the still shapes, quite similar to ours. Those tie in with the style of distillation. And again, Armagnac, kind of that fruit character sits well. It's a softer influence than sherries. And then we're really looking at new oak for wood trials. We have the Limousine Oak 14-year-old finish coming out later this year. And we've been working with new French oak for the last kind of 3-4 years. We've looked at different regions. I think Simon has looks like our GTR 14-year-old. So we looked at Limousin, Moselle, and Vosges oak. That's just from 3 different forests in France. We tried them for finishing, got, again, 3 very different flavors from them. Limousin was my preferred choice, so we're running with that for the new expression.
So in there, you just sort of mentioned finishing. One question that has been coming up a little bit for me is, where do you distinguish the difference between a finish and a second maturation? Is it a certain time length, or?
It's probably about 12 months. So I'd say 12 months is a finish. And longer than that is a second maturation, but it's probably relevant to the age of the spirit.
I was about to say, does the
if you have a 40-year-old and you put it in a new cask for 6 to 12 months, it's not going to have a huge impact. So again, it's partly to do with the impact of the spirit on the cask.
Yeah.
So the impact of the cask on the spirit, but also the kind of the relative age of the spirit.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things we've been discussing is, in theory, I suppose it depends on the country it's matured in as well, but if it's had a full 4 seasons, in theory, it's a maturation rather than a finish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would say it's probably, if you're talking anything up to kind of 10, 12 years, under Scottish maturation conditions, you then put it in something for a year, you will get a discernible impact from that new cask. So it's really, if it's making a meaningful impact in that kind of time, then it's a finish. But then after that, it's, can you get them up? So it's really integrating more with the first maturation, so it's harder to kind of separate out the 2 influences.
Yeah, because I mean, I sort of asked a similar question to somebody else recently. So I've asked it to a few people, and it's amazing how different the answers are. Because one of the people, they said, if it doesn't matter how long it spends in the cask, it's a finish. It's not a second maturation. There's no such thing as a double maturation. Whereas obviously you and another person in theory have come up with the same answer. So again, it's subject to opinion.
I think if you mature something for 3 years and then change the cask type and mature it for another 9 years,
it's not a finish.
Yeah, the dominant cask will be that 9 years.
Yeah.
So that, I'd say it's a double maturation rather than a finish.
Yeah, no, I would agree with you. I mean, you know, my philosophy is that if it's had 4 seasons, in theory, it's a maturation, it's not a finish.
I guess it's maybe more a percentage of time the second type of cask against the first one. If it's 3 and 3, it's a double maturation. If it's like 12 and 3, maybe just a long finish. Or
I did think that the finish term came from only 6 months of being in barrel, of a different barrel, sorry. But anyway, that's just what I've read in all my textbooks. So it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. It's just what I've come across. I did have a little bit of a question. I've not been to your distillery before, but I think everyone more or less on here has. I just wanted to know if your grain and your malt were completely separate, like the whole process. Are they done in completely separate buildings or sites?
Well, our kind of conventional wheat-based single grain that we use for blending is done in a separate building. Well, it's a separate building joined on to the malt distillery, so it's actually kind of, they're stuck together, but it's a fully separate building. Our malt-based single grain, it shares the same lighter tun and washbacks as our pot still distilled single malt. So when and then it's matured the same way as our single malts. So for what we bottle as single grain in the black bottle, the distillation is the only part of that that's different to the single malt. And it's mashed the same way. It's the same malted barley. It's mashed the same way. It's fermented in the same way as for our straight neck pot stills. It then just goes to a different valve block. One goes to the pot neck or the straight neck pot stills, and the other way goes to the continuous malt still.
Any more
Michael,
questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I've got a question. Michael, how long have you had the sort of bourbon-only cask program, and what brought that about?
Originally, it probably would have. It's been in place really since well, before the current ownership. We used mostly American oak. That was based on price. Just bourbons just used to be able to buy bourbons for, like, up until 2005, bourbons were probably about $40 a cask. Come 2014, they were up to about $200 a cask. But even at that, they're a lot cheaper than sherry wood.
Yeah.
Since 2014, we've started to buy sherry wood for Glen Scotia, but we've kept Loch Lomond on bourbon, and that has been a conscious decision that we want that kind of bourbon character to support the distillery character more.
Of course, yeah.
If you look at
Tony
our
Porter,
Glen Scotia range, we're using Oloroso PX. Just did the Tawny Port there for the festival. We're using a lot more kind of big wood influences on Glen Scotia.
Yeah.
Loch Lomond, we wanted to be the distillery character that you're getting the kind of main flavors from. So we're using the softer influence of bourbon for that.
Michael, the Tawny Port Loch Lomond that you released for the whiskey shop, are you saying that you'd only release them kind of casks to your partner distributors rather than yourself?
We're only going to release those as kind of exclusive cask bottlings. So I don't see those going into like even a limited release for us.
Okay.
and that's sorry.
Will we still see some single cast releases then?
Yeah, that's again. I talked about Ashley coming in to help out, so our kind of single cask exclusive cask program is probably gone up by 4 times the number of casks we're doing every year.
Yeah,
we're probably gone up to about, not including China, about 200 casks we're offering this year across Glen Scotia and Loch Lomond.
Right. I mean, one question that's just come through from Simon is, how do we get a cask off you? Obviously, we want it at a discount as well.
It's really, I think it's going to be a lot easier to do that now. We used to be, I think we were with Gordon and McPhail for a UK distributor.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of gone ourselves now. So it would be approaching the sales team and
so if we all travel up and bring a bottle and a cork, then we can just do it that way. Save on a bit of money.
No, but
could we call it the asylum?
So, no, I'm not sure how the commercials work. I'm not involved with the sales side a lot. We tend not to deal with individuals. Really, we don't have a big team for customer support.
We're a group, so it's okay.
To deal with.
I mean, what I'm going to do now, Michael, I'm going to end the recording so we can just chat in general now. But obviously, while we're still recording, I'd just like to really thank you for your time, for coming on, for putting up with us, especially.
Well, thank you.
Some of them don't shut up very much, just keep talking. And,
sorry about that.
but you know, thank you for your time. We will still stay on, but I'm just going to stop the recording. So thank you very much.
Yeah, really appreciate
for
it.
having me
Michael.
today.
It's been incredibly
Cheers.
informative. I just need to grab my laptop charger. I'll be right back.